This document is a reconstructed fictional dossier compiled from leaked internal records, dated January 21st, 2026, for months after Yu Menglong was pronounced dead in September 2025. The public was told his death was sudden and natural. Internally, that conclusion collapsed within hours. Yu Menglong was found in his residence just before dawn. No forced entry. No visible wounds. No signs of a struggle. The apartment was quiet in a way investigators later described as prepared. His primary phone was present but scrubbed. A secondary device had vanished. His laptop, always carried when he traveled, was missing. The security system logged 2 door openings during the night, yet the cameras recorded nothing but static for 46 minutes. Maintenance was cited. No maintenance order existed. The autopsy released to the press listed organ failure. The sealed addendum did not. Trace compounds were detected. Legal in isolation, lethal in sequence, administered with timing that suggested planning rather than panic. The dosage curve indicated familiarity with his body, his habits, and his tolerance. Someone knew how long he slept. Someone knew what he took at night. Someone knew how to make a death look like an ending instead of an interruption. Within 72 hours, the investigative scope expanded. By the end of the first week, 17 individuals were detained or placed under sealed indictment. The number shocked even veteran officers. It was not the count that mattered, but the pattern. Each suspect intersected with Yu Menglong's private access points. Keys, codes, schedules, prescriptions, finances, data. No strangers. No random threats. Only people who belonged. The early theory of a lone actor failed immediately. The erasures were too clean. The delays were coordinated. Bank alerts triggered after death, not before. Cloud backups were partially purged, but not entirely. A junior analyst noticed metadata inconsistencies and flagged them. The flag was ignored. The analyst filed again. This time, the flag was escalated. The case could no longer be contained. Among the 17, one file was marked differently. Elevated priority. Familiarity risk. He was publicly known as Yu Menglong's closest friend, present in photographs, referenced in interviews as family. He had unrestricted access to the residence and a standing calendar exception that bypassed assistant approvals. He was the last confirmed person to see Yu Menglong alive. His first statement placed distance between them, weeks without contact. Digital records disagreed. Location data showed proximity. Elevator logs showed access. The blackout window aligned with his arrival and departure. When confronted, he amended his statement, then amended it again. Each revision removed certainty and added ambiguity, a strategy investigators recognize when truth is being negotiated. Recovered voice drafts, never sent, saved and deleted, then partially reconstructed, changed the tone of the case. Yu Menglong spoke quietly, cautiously, as if aware of being overheard even by himself. He referenced pressure, trust, and consequences. He spoke of silence as a currency he no longer wished to spend. One fragment, incomplete, suggested an impending break, a decision to disengage from arrangements that blurred friendship and ownership. Financial review exposed off-ledger counts and proxy signatures. None bore Yu Menglong's direct authorization, yet all benefited from his continued compliance. Termination drafts were found and signed but dated. A private journal entry from 4 days before death described loyalty being mistaken for obedience and love being used as leverage. Investigators concluded that the moment he prepared to leave was the moment the timeline accelerated. The initial plan appears to have relied on invisibility. No noise, no scandal. A quiet passing that could be explained, archived, and forgotten. But invisibility requires perfection. Perfection failed. A compound metabolized unpredictably. A device failed to fully erase remote backups. An officer refused to close a loop without evidence. The truth began to surface not because it was allowed, but because it resisted burial. As the investigation widened, it crossed borders. Yu Menglong's image had economic gravity. Contracts, endorsements, and distribution pipelines spanned continents. When he died, systems that depended on his silence began to move defensively. Funds shifted. Lawyers contacted intermediaries. 3 unrelated inquiries in different jurisdictions discovered the same names in different contexts. What began as a death became a map. By October 2025, internal briefings acknowledged what public statements denied. This was not an accident. This was a coordinated act enabled by intimacy and protected by influence. Arrests were staggered to prevent evidence flight. Communications were compartmentalized. Even within the task force, information was rationed. The fear was not of suspects escaping, but the case being softened. Interrogations revealed a common language. Everyone claimed to be protecting him. No one admitted to controlling him. The line between care and coercion blurred in testimony, then hardened under cross-examination. Some suspects cooperated quickly, trading partial truths for reduced exposure. Others remained silent, confident that silence still worked. The closest friend maintained innocence. He denied administering anything. He denied instructing anyone. Investigators focused on what he knew and when he stopped protecting Yu Menglong's choices. Trust, in this case, was not a feeling but an access protocol. Once granted, it allowed everything else. As of January 21st, 2026, no final charges have been announced publicly. Internally, the case remains open and classified as coordinated homicide with intimate access and institutional shielding. Evidence is sealed. Names are redacted. The apartment remains locked. Unreleased projects sit unfinished. The last clear decision Yu Menglong made, to step away, stands as the pivot point around which every timeline turns. The file ends without closure. No single mastermind is named. Responsibility is distributed across proximity, benefit, and fear. In the margins of the final page, an unsigned note appears, written by hand. Everyone wanted the light he stood in, but when he chose to leave it, the shadow became dangerous. What the public never saw were the nights that followed the arrests, when the case stopped behaving like a murder investigation and began to resemble a quiet war. Evidence did not simply surface. It resisted. Files appeared corrupted only on certain terminals. Witnesses requested legal counsel within minutes of being contacted, as if warned in advance. A senior officer wrote in an internal memo that the case was alive, shifting shape whenever pressure was applied. Interrogation transcripts revealed a pattern investigators had not anticipated. Several suspects described the same moment, months before Yu Menglong's death, when his behavior changed. He became cautious with words. He asked questions he had never asked before. He stopped sharing drafts of contracts. He began locking doors that had always been open. To those who benefited from his access, this felt like betrayal. To him, it felt like survival. One witness recalled a private conversation in which Yu Menglong said he wanted to reset his life, not retire, not disappear. Reset. The phrasing mattered. He intended to reclaim authorship over his choices, his finances, his relationships. He believed he could do this quietly. Investigators now believe that assumption cost him time he did not have. Behind closed doors, prosecutors debated a dangerous question. Was this a murder driven by fear or a silencing driven by exposure? The difference would determine how far the investigation could go. Financial trails suggested preemptive behavior. Accounts repositioned weeks before death. Legal defenses drafted before any accusation existed. Someone expected consequences. Someone planned for them. The closest friend remained central. Phone records showed calls routed through encrypted services during the final week. None contained content, only duration and timing. Long enough to plan, short enough to deny. When confronted with the reconstructed voice drafts, he did not deny the voice was Yu Menglong's. He questioned the interpretation. It was a familiar tactic. Accept the artifact, contest of meaning. A breakthrough came unexpectedly from an unrelated audit. A foreign distributor flagged irregular royalty delays tied to a shell entity that shared an address with consultancy linked to one of the 17. The address led nowhere physically, but digitally it led everywhere. Data pulled from that node connected multiple suspects who had claimed no contact with one another. The narrative of isolation collapsed. By December 2025, the case file had tripled in size. International cooperation expanded quietly. What alarmed investigators most was not the complexity, but the restraint. No one panicked publicly. No one leaked defensively. This was not chaos. It was discipline. The system around Yu Menglong had learned how to protect itself long before he tried to leave it. Inside the task force, morale fractured. Some officers wanted immediate charges to force confessions. Others argued patience would expose higher layers. The risk was time. Memories fade. Pressure dulls. Silence regains value. The longer the case remained sealed, the more the public accepted the original story. Natural causes. Tragic timing. Move on. Yet fragments continue to surface. A deleted calendar entry labeled only Yendi. A handwritten note found tucked into a book, reading, "If I stop, they don't." A final bank instruction scheduled but never executed. Each fragment pointed to intent. Yu Menglong was not drifting. He was preparing. The most chilling realization emerged during a late-night review session. The team mapped every access point used in the final 48 hours. Every access belonged to someone he trusted. There were no intrusions, no external threats. The danger came dressed as familiarity. Investigators stopped asking how someone got close enough to harm him. They asked why closeness had never been questioned. As January 2026 arrived, pressure mounted from all sides. Media interest threatened to reignite. Legal teams tested boundaries. Diplomatic channels requested updates without requesting truth. The case hovered in a fragile balance between exposure and erasure. One prosecutor summarized it plainly. If they moved too fast, the case would shatter. If they moved too slow, it would vanish. The final pages of the continuation file contain a warning rather than a conclusion. It states that cases like this do not end with arrests. They end when silence stops being rewarded. Until then, responsibility remains distributed, diluted across relationships, contracts, and choices that felt harmless at the time. Yu Menglong's name remains sealed on several documents, not to protect the dead, but to protect the living who still benefit from misunderstanding what happened. The truth exists, but it is layered, and layers require patience to peel. This story is not finished. What has been released is only what survived deletion. If you want to uncover what was almost erased, if you want deeper investigations, darker reconstructions, and stories that expose the shadows behind fame, power, and trust across Asia, the United States, Spain, the UK, and beyond, subscribe to K-Drama Spark now. Join a global community that doesn't just watch stories unfold, but questions what's hidden between the scenes.